on this episode of The Powers Project.
Well, what we're seeing right now with George Floyd and all this, we might say, well, George Floyd, this is the result of what happened to them. And I beg to differ. He might have lit the candle, he might have lit the fireworks, but this started in 1619. And again, going back to Adam Smith, we weren't allowed to pursue our divine self-interest.
Dr. Kimbro, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me. As I told you earlier, when I started this podcast, before I started this podcast, I'd made a list of ideal guests that I would love to have, and you were in my top 10. So to have you on here is more than just a pleasure. So thank you for being here.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Dave Letterman, top 10, man. I feel honored.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd be more honored if I was David Letterman. The reason why you're such a big influence on me is because I read your book, Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice, back in 1992, I believe it was. And I was just so, in fact, that's where I first heard from your book about Madam C.J. Walker, which I also got to ask you a question, because in your book, I believe it said that Madam C.J. Walker was born into slavery right before the end of the Civil War. And I watched I watched a show about Madam C.J. Walker on Netflix a couple months ago. And it said that she was born after the war. Not that it matters because of the.
No, her father was born into slavery.
Okay, gotcha. So I must have just misread it. So,
and not only that, but Madam C.J. Walker launched her business in the teeth of the Spanish flu epidemic.
Oh, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So, and so when I read these stories, I was like, you know what? There's nothing that we have to go through today that even comes close to the things that she had to go through. And also,
it all goes back to your belief system and what Napoleon Hill discussed. And I'm not going to belabor it. It sounds like you've done your homework on me, but the book 1991, Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice, was Napoleon Hill, who was by far America's #1 top, motivational writer, self-help writer. He was attempting to write a black version of his all-time classic that was published in 1937, the original Think and Grow Rich. And Kurt, I didn't know it. And you asked the question, what led me to write this book and why did I believe? And I tell people all the time, I wasn't motivated to write that book. Just like you discovered me, I was discovered by W. Clement Stone when I was about 2.5 years into my book, which was going to be What Makes the Great Great. And I just flew home from spending the better part of a day with Earl Graves, the publisher of Black Enterprise magazine, who several months ago made his transition. And unbeknownst to me, my life changed forever when I got home and I saw where W. Clement Stone called me. I hit my answering machine. Can you imagine that? An answering machine? No call waiting, no caller ID, no beeping, no nothing, no notifications, no nothing. I ask my students all the time, so what is life going to appear like after Google? What is life going to appear like after Facebook? Yeah. And, you got to get paid. I don't care what you do for a living. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business owner, you're operating 2 businesses. Dr. Kimbro, what in the world are you talking about? Well, the business that you're in and the enterprise that your business is becoming. And sure, a lot of businesses went out of, they went by the wayside because of this pandemic, coronavirus. But if they didn't know that they were going to operate 2 businesses, they were going to go out of business anyway. So the fact that bleeds over into my response. This is all about your belief system. The only thing that kept me going, the only thing that kept Napoleon Hill going, because he was on a 20-year quest. And he says this in his original book. You read the first 30 pages of Think and Grow Rich, and he tells you a number of times that there's a secret hidden on these pages. Well, Kurt, what the hell is the secret? It is a burning desire. A burning desire leads to the passionate, committed mind, and the passionate, committed mind can never be defeated. That's what separates, the successful from the unsuccessful. And my definition of success, which I share in both of those books, is progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal. You can't throw a dollar figure on it. Now, Napoleon Hill wrote 16 books. To me, his best book is not the original Think and Grow Rich, or not the book, The Quest, that Andrew Carnegie placed him on, but his next to last book called The Master Key to Riches. Now, why do I say The Master Key to Riches is his top book? Because he finally extrapolates on success. And he says that success is a six-pointed star, Kurt, and you can judge, you can gauge wherever you are in life by the various points of the star that you've incorporated in your life. And the number one point of that star is peace of mind. And what is peace of mind? It's the absence of all negative emotions. Now, you said we were going to touch on a number of areas and issues, and let me bring this front and center. Martin Luther King said there's two types of peace. There's a positive peace and a negative peace. And what is a negative peace? Let's start with the negative peace. He said, on the outside, you don't see any tension, you don't see any fights, you don't see any engagement, physical engagement, but below it all, you can feel the uneasiness in society. That's what we're going through right now, okay? He said a positive peace is the beloved community. That's what King said. He said, this civil rights movement is not about your right to vote. It is not about equal opportunity. It is not about, justice for all. This civil rights movement is about creation of the beloved community. And Napoleon Hill said the same thing, man, back in the late 1960s. Peace of mind. What does the Bible say, Kurt? The Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers. And we don't even know what that means. That doesn't mean that me and you, we had words and we broke out into a fight and somebody said, come on, Dennis, come on, Kurt. You guys have been friends for so long. Hug each other, shake hands, and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't mean that. It means blessed are those who have peace of mind. Now, what does that have to do with today that we're seeing with Black Lives Matter and the police and this, that, and everything? Well, let me give you the backflap story. I had an older brother. It was just me and my brother, two siblings, and he made his transition about 4 years ago. My brother was a state trooper. He was state police in New Jersey. He has two sons, my two nephews, and they follow in the same path of their father. My brother was a captain in the state police in New Jersey, and his two sons are both sergeants in towns in New Jersey, and both of them are police officers. And we talk all the time, and we talk about, man, and they run a hard line. If you think that, I might be liberal and I might think the police need to do that, you ought to hear these two guys, man. Why? Because it's not about, when we talk about Black Lives Matter and all lives matter, certainly all lives matter. But it's not about, how do I want to say this? It's not about, the state police on one side and you have the rioters on the other side. People say, well, Dr. Kimbro, I'm just trying to see the other side. I'm just trying to view from that vantage point. Kurt, there's only one side. And what is that side? That side is love. There's only one side. That side is love. I've been all over the world, Kurt, and I've been in countries and cities where the police aren't even armed. Well, what is the difference between the police who are armed and come to the United States where you might find them, locked and loaded to the teeth? Well, if you're a policeman, say Barbados in one of the countries that aren't armed, what is the job and what is the duty of the police? Well, your job, if you're unarmed and you're an officer in the police, is to maintain the peace, all right? Just like I gave you the scenario right there. You and I are residents of Barbados, and we had to call the cops because we had a disagreement. The role of the police officer is to maintain the peace. Well, if you come to the United States and you come to Atlanta, because it has occurred to me, or you go to New York, or you go to Oakland, California, and the officer steps out of his car and he's got on his camo and he's loaded to the teeth. What is his job? What is his objective? His job, his objective is to administer justice by any means necessary as he or she sees it. And that is the difference. I remember I was coming home from class one day, and I know that it was either a Monday or a Wednesday because I wasn't in a suit. Every day I teach, I'm booted and suited. So I know it was either on a Monday or Wednesday. Kurt, this will blow you away. So there's a section about before I'm gonna get on the I-20 and go home to major thoroughfare, and which is a four-way stop. And so I go that way all the time, and it's a four-way stop, look to the left, look to the right, and I come to stop, and then I go about my merry way. Well, this time I came, and as soon as I made that right-hand turn, woo, 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 the lights go off like that. What is this about, man? And I turn around and I stop my car. Actually, I pulled my car over because I thought maybe the police they were after somebody. I didn't think they were after me. I mean, it's a four-way stop, and I stopped, and blah, blah, blah. So I pulled over, and sure enough, the car comes out behind me. And out of the car steps a young black female officer, and she's in her fatigues, and she is armed to the teeth. And she comes up to me and she says, license and registration. And I hand it to her, and she says, you know, that's a four-way stop. I said, yes, I know. I travel home, you know, every night, blah, blah, blah. So, well, you didn't come to a stop. And I said, I didn't. And I said, officer, yes, I did. I came to the stop. I looked, and she said, no, you didn't come to a full stop. You rolled the stop. And I said, oh, and I wasn't wearing my seatbelt at the time. Just young black girl, hair and dreads and everything. And she says to me, she says, now where's your seatbelt? And I said, oh, officer, I forgot. I'll go ahead and put it on. And she hands me back my license and registration. And she says, be safe. And she walks away. Now, Kurt, this will blow you away. As I'm placing my license and registration back into my wallet, I didn't even know she heard me. I said under my breath, I said, wow, Atlanta police are trying to go to heaven. I didn't know she heard it. Sure enough, she hears it. She walks back to my car. She points the finger at me and she said, I know I'm going to heaven. Now you be safe and walk. So now I shared that story with you, Kurt. I teach case method in the School of Business. Let's change the case, okay? Instead of a young black female, let's go to middle-aged white male. Would the outcome have been the same? I got home, I asked that question of my wife, and you know what she said? Well, first and foremost, you would need me home right now. So, exactly. Hey, I hope we touched on a number of things. There's only one side, and that side is love.
So for you to all the things that we're going through right now, your whole concept is that it's because we don't have enough love, that we don't have enough love for each other, that we're exactly. How did we get to this point? I mean, how did we go from because I know when you were younger and when I was younger, we had a sense of our neighborhood. We knew our neighbors, you know, and exactly. Again, as kids, if we were doing something wrong and that one of our neighbors saw it, they could come out and yell at us just as much as our own parents. And that's all changed. So what do you think happened to where we don't care about one another anymore, where we only care about ourselves? I mean, what do you see as the catalyst for that?
Well, I'm a big subscriber of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, as well as John Maxwell. And what do they all have in common? Okay, as a scholar, as a researcher, I can tell when they sort of, you know, tipped in on that side of the street of Napoleon Hill, because in his earlier writings, Napoleon Hill talks about values. Now, Kurt, there are 21 human values, all right? Number 1 is achievement, and number 21 is wisdom, all right? People say all the time, Dr. Kimbro, we live in an information-driven society. No, man, we do not live in an information-driven age. People don't want information. What do they want? They want wisdom. What do we do? You know, you look at the social media and you look at the regular media, they have one thing in common. What is that? Not to inform you, but to startle you. So people want to know, what do I do? Well, I'm going to tell you what to do. Number one, you never compromise your values. You never compromise your values. The Bible is a very old book, but it's still ahead of the time. And what are the values of the Bible? The 10 Commandments. Now, the 10 Commandments aren't written to punish you. God doesn't punish you. You punish yourself. The 10 Commandments are there to protect you. And how do you protect you? You are driven by your values. Earlier, you said you were going to ask me a question, and I had it in the back of my mind about the system is being, whether the system is rigged on behalf of the wealthy and this, that. And I'm glad you brought it up, because we live in a capitalistic society. And what is capitalism? You've done your homework on me. You've heard me say that capitalism is not a dirty word. You take the Latin derivative of the word capitalism, C-A-P-U-T, kaput, it means head in Latin. Well, who came up with that whole concept? Adam Smith. Here you are in my study. I can go back there and I got rows and rows and rows and rows and shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves of books. And I'm going to show you my copy of Adam Smith. All right? And I can give it to you. You can read it, highlighted, notes in the margin. But what do we know about Adam Smith? Well, number one, he was a moral philosopher. Okay? Number two, he was an economist. And number three, beneath it all, he was anti-slavery. And he tells you within the first 30 pages of his book that this whole system, capitalism, is based upon the following. I allow Kurt Powers to pursue his divine self-interest, and Kurt Powers would allow Dennis Kimbro to pursue his divine self-interest. And who is going to benefit when we're both allowed to pursue our divine self-interest? IH. What is IH? It's invisible hand. And what is the invisible hand? The greater good. Then he goes on to say, if either of the parties are blocked, it doesn't work. It is not capitalism. Well, what we're seeing right now with George Floyd and all this, we might say, well, George Floyd, you know, this is the result of what happened to them. And I beg to differ. He might have lit the candle. He might have lit the fireworks, but this started in 1619. And again, going back to Adam Smith, we weren't allowed to pursue our divine self-interest. That's what we have got to get back on. So what have we had that entire time? We've had socialism for the rich. Now, I go on to say that, and I look on and I listen to all these quote unquote experts talk about reparations and this, that, and everything. And they don't even know the beginning of reparations, Kurt. Reparations were created by the Quakers in the 17th century. And what did the Quakers say? It is a spiritual act. Reparations is a spiritual act. And it's not about me reaching into my pocket and giving money to somebody who I had an indiscretion with, somebody that I took advantage of. It's not about that. The only thing, according to the Quakers, that you must do in order to be forgiven, in order to give for reparations, number one, you must ask for forgiveness. Kurt, I know when you went looking, Kurt, I know I'm in your house, you invited me over, you got up, you had to use the restroom, and I'm in your kitchen, no one was looking, and I went in that cookie jar and I took that last cookie in your kitchen. It was me, Kurt. Please forgive me. So number one, you ask for forgiveness. And this is critical, Kurt. And you need to tell other folks when you get into your circle and talking with your friends from different ethnicities and cultures. Man, I finally learned what reparations is, thanks to Dr. Kimbro. Number two, this is critically important. I gotta be able to tell you, Kurt, I apologize, number one, but number two, I will never do that act again. All right? So slavery, Emancipation Proclamation, it's the apology, now you are free. But you never said, I will never do that act again. So after slavery, what comes? The black codes. And after the black codes, what comes? Jim Crow. And after Jim Crow, what did you come up with next? Separate but equal. And after separate but equal, what did you come up with next? The Tuskegee experiment. And after the Tuskegee experiment, what did you come up with next? Redlining. Then after redlining, what did you come up with? Subprime loans. And then afterwards, subprime loans, it kept going on and on and on. Because you never said, Quakers, 17th century, I will never do that act again. That is a powerful metaphor for where we should be. Now, reparations. All right, you got these folks out here that are talking about a dollar figure, everybody get. Not me, you'll never get me, all right? You take the GDP and divide it by 34, 36 million African Americans, and what are you going to give? You're going to give everybody a check for $156,000. Not me, no way. Why? Because the level of our financial literacy, if the government gave us a check on Monday, it'd be back in the federal federal coffers on Tuesday, because we have no concept of financial literacy. But this is what I would do, and Kurt, it wouldn't cost a dime. It wouldn't cost a dime. First and foremost, this is the only advanced country in the world. When you look at all the other advanced countries in the world, Kurt, we are the only advanced country in the world that attaches the quality of education to home values. Now, here I am in Atlanta, Georgia. Those home values up in Buckhead are a lot higher than the home values in Bankhead. Well, who lives up in Buckhead? I mean, affluent whites, man. Who lives down in Bankhead? Low income, poor blacks, Hispanics, whatever. We all have the same aberrations. And just like you said, when we were growing up, we didn't know anything about all this nonsense. These kids are innocent. We all want the same thing. So the kid in Buckhead, I mean, whether he gets an education or not, his father can pick up the cell phone, call the CEO of Home Depot, and get his life back on track. It's the kid in Bankhead who needs the education. It's the kids, the low income, the poor kids who need that one shot. And what is that one shot? Read the book. So number one, change that. No, but I don't care where you go to school. It's not going to be based on your home. Everybody's going to get the same funding and the same economic foundation in terms of their education. Number two, and this is critically important, all right, you have right now about 4,700 banks in the United States. 4,700, Kurt. Only 38 are black owned. Now, we have all type, corporate America has programs like minority supplier development. We're going to get a couple of minority suppliers to help us, you know, with our supply chain and this, that. That's well and good. But I want to go one step further. As a matter of fact, you can scrap that whole minority supplier. This is what I want you to do. I want you to take the Fortune 500 and tell the Fortune 500 every year, I want to take a minimum, preferably 10% of your profits. And I want you to put it in a black bank for a commitment of 5 years. What in the world would happen? Oh my God. You would have the miracle of unleashed compound interest flowing throughout the black community. Now, why do I say that? Because of those 38 black banks of 4,700, Kurt, who were their customers? Number one, low income, impoverished black customers deposit in that bank. So number one, you get low deposits and you get multiple withdrawals. Low deposits, in other words, you can't do anything with that money. You can't give out mortgages, you can't give out car loans, you can't use it on equity to send your kid to college. They are barely open. Flip the paradigm. So number two, still didn't cost you a cent and would have a greater impact. And then last but not least, Kurt, the only reason in the last election, and I know she had problems, I know she had challenges, whatever. Was she on par? I don't know. You can say the same thing about anybody that got off. The only reason Well, I voted for Hillary Clinton, the last election of all the candidates, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, unit. She was the only one that discussed on a part of her platform equal compensation for women. Dr. Kimbro earns $1. I want you to earn $1. Right now, if I earn $1, the most, there's not a state in the nation that'll pay women more than 88 cents for the dollar that you and I would earn. You know what it is for black women? It's about 68 cents. So what do I want to do? I want equal compensation. I want dollar for dollar. Now, why is that particularly important in the black community? Because 73% of these households in the black community are female-led. 73% where they aren't a contributing breadwinner, they are the only breadwinner in that house. So you pay all these black women, all these black women in the black community, dollar for dollar. What would you just might do, Kirk Powers? Number one, you might end poverty in the black community. Number two, instead of these black women with 2 children living in these apartments, I might get a house. You get a house, you got equity. Now here, my book number 5, I did nothing over a 7-year period, interview, survey, and held focus groups on black millionaires. I rubbed shoulders with more than 1,100 black millionaires. At the time, there were only 35,000. And I asked them on my survey of 118 questions, what was the best money move you made? More than 95% came back and told me buying their first house. Buying their first house. It wasn't the marketing strategy that came up with their product or service. It wasn't chasing their dream. It was buying their first house. Now, those are 3 things. Again, reparations didn't cost a dime, didn't make anybody go in their pocket. We got this big image that life is zero sum. Life isn't zero sum. If you win, I don't lose. Look, you bake the pie that you want. You bake the cake that you want. We've got to get out of that mentality, and the same thing applies to reparations. Now that is powerful. Now you look at Lincoln. What made Lincoln different? Lincoln was different. All right, this guy only went to school to the 4th grade. But you talk about your network is your net worth. He was hugely influenced by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And what was Ralph Waldo? He was an existentialist. And I tell my students all the time, true nobility, Kurt, true nobility is, yes, my students can learn from me, but true nobility means I can learn just as much from my students. All right, so you got Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was an existentialist. His number 1 student was Henry David Thoreau. Henry David Thoreau was Ralph Waldo Emerson's number 1 student. And what do we know about Henry David Thoreau? Well, he was incarcerated. Why? He refused to pay his income taxes. Why? He didn't like the way that Native Americans and former slaves were treated. So they threw him in jail. And one day, Ralph Waldo Emerson goes down to the prison to see his number 1 student. And there's Henry David Thoreau behind the prison bars. And Emerson says, Henry, what in the world are you doing in there? And Henry David Thoreau looks back at his professor and says, Dr. Emerson, what are you doing out there?
Wow.
That's where we need to be in life. You don't go to school one period in life. Look, damn it, you're in school every day of life. Growth, development, and that's what Napoleon Hill talked about. You can't throw a dollar figure on it. What is success? Success is growth. Success is development. Success is being better today than what you were yesterday. Success is epiphany. Success is thanks for sharing them. I never thought about that. And that's where the current administration misses it. You got a guy there who doesn't know anything about empathy. That's a part of success. Kurt, thanks for bringing that to my attention. So what was I doing last Friday? Well, I spent all Friday morning, I was at a food bank. And I probably learned more in those 4 hours handing out boxes and packages of food than any course I took for my doctorate at Northwestern. Well, whoa, thank you. I didn't know that about you. Thank you. All different races, all different ethnicities, all different cultures. That's powerful. Now, I know you didn't want to hear that from me in the podcast. I
No,
know you probably wanted to go off on different,
let me
but
tell you.
it's not either or, it's
Right.
and in both, my brother.
Exactly. And let me tell you something right now. I feel like I'm brilliant because the best thing I could do is just shut my mouth and let you continue talking because you're absolutely brilliant. I couldn't, like, I didn't expect the podcast to go in this direction, but I wouldn't change this for anything in the world. I love that you're just able to continue to go from one spot to another because all these words are powerful. I got to ask you though, you talk about that, but here's the issue: is that a challenge that I see is that this country we become as Americans we become very self-centered. We become very very about me,
Oh, yeah.
and so while all these things that you talk about are great, how do we get people back into caring about other people? Because that we're not
Well,
there. We haven't
it
been there.
started with our economic system. Okay, so
Right.
you are well. I'm assuming I'm a baby boomer. You're a lot younger than me.
I'm
Okay,
not. I'm
so
not. But
so I mean, it starts with the economic premise. All right. Okay, after World War II and after the Korean War, and from Eisenhower to Kennedy to Nixon and blah blah blah, America was slamming. America was wiping the floor with every other country economically. When you look at the GDP of the world, I mean, America was serving more than 50, 60, almost 70% of the goods and services. And what did? We rested on our laurels. You know, when I talk about economic success, Kurt, and you might make a note of this, I tell my students all the time, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner. Don't come rushing up to me when you get the order. No, you come to me when you get the reorder. And it's the same thing with success. When you hit your goal, when you hit the number one goal that you wanted in life, yeah, everybody gets a pat on the back, but true success is what you are doing when you think you got it made. That's true success. Yeah, you can be hungry, Michael Jordan. You can be hungry, Kobe Bryant. And because of your hunger, you put in the hard work. You put in the 7 years, and now you got the 6 championship rings and this, that, and everything. But I want to know what you're doing when you think you got it made. And that is critical. So going back to this country, what were we doing when we thought that we had it made? We rested on our laurels. And because we rested on our laurels, we got away from the root cause of it all. And we rested on our laurels, in terms of economic development. We sort of pulled away from the customer and this and that. And we got a little soft and we got a little ambivalent and this, that, and everything. Now, what does that have to do with us right now? Because we rested on our laurels, we pulled away from each other and we didn't care about each other. Steve Wynn out there in Las Vegas, and he has a great example of this. All right, so he's got the number one casino or one of the top 3 casinos out in Las Vegas. And when he makes a new hire, the first thing he tells that new hire, whether he's a bellman or whether a chambermaid or working as chief financial officer, counting the money after every day, he says, I want you to treat the customer as if you would treat your mother. Treat the customer as if you would treat your mother. Well, what does that have to do with society? It's the way that we treat each other. It's the way that we treat each other. Kurt, what do I tell my students? All right, I'm a business professor. I said, well, I know that you're from New York, and I know that you're an accounting major, and I know that you want to work for one of the big 4 accounting firms, and I know that you want to get your CPA, and I know within 5, 6, 7 years you want your own business, but beneath it all, I know that you're somebody's child. We don't do that anymore. We don't do that anymore. Kurt, sooner or later, everybody's going to leave this world. Me and you and everybody listening, watching this podcast, one day will leave this world. not by dying, but when we know the truth. And what is the truth? Complete thy noble task. You've been sent here to do this task. Do it and give of yourself to service to others. Give of yourself to service to others. Why was I born in 1950 and maybe you born in 1960 or whatever? How come you were born the same year I was born? Well, the world wasn't ready for you. The world wasn't ready for you. But 10 years later, 20 years later, all the lights are green, all the stops have been moved. Kurt, do what I sent you to do. If I asked you, Kurt, I said, describe what you do for a living. Would you tell me it's work? Will you tell me it's a job?
No.
If you tell me it's work, if you tell me it's a job, that might be heavy, that might be tiring, whatever. Would you tell me it's a career? Hopefully you tell me it's a mission. It's a mission, because if you tell me it's a mission, you are completely engaged. You have an end game. That's Simon Sinek. You have an end game. This is what I've been sent here to do. And I don't care whether the naysayers, I don't care whether the doubters, I don't care the cynics, whatever. Everybody that we're enamored with in life, everybody that one day in life we look up to, whether it's Beyonce, whether it's Mother Teresa, at one time they were ridiculed, they were scoffed, they were laughed at. We have got to discipline our disappointment. Somebody spits in your face, somebody laughs at you, somebody tells you that you're crazy. Just give it 30 seconds. Oh yeah, then I'm going to move on. Why? I'm on a mission. That's what Napoleon Hill talks about. There's a difference between a desire and a burning desire. A burning desire is an inner candle, inner flame that cannot be extinguished. And though the worst may go before you, you're going to use the doubt, you're going to use the cynicism, you're going to use the laughter, you're going to use the non-belief of others to propel you forward. That's powerful, man. And that's something that each of us can do. And that's not me. Booker T. Washington said it all. Booker T. Washington said, do what you've been sent here to do. And his exact words are, start where you are, with what you have, knowing that what you have is plenty enough. One day he's walking the streets of what is now Birmingham, Alabama, and he's with one of his assistants, and he's walking down the streets in the early 1900s of Birmingham, and a white gentleman just goes ahead and brushes him off and knocks Booker T. Washington into the street. His assistant says, as Washington gets up and dusts off the sleeves and adjusts the jacket, says, Dr. Washington, you're going to let him get away with that? You should go ahead and give him a piece of your mind. And what did Booker T. Washington tell his assistant? He said, I will never allow anyone to motivate me, to compel me to hate. He knew what he was here to do. Now, Kurt, about back in January, and it's the second time I've done it, well, I've had 3 presentations. Carnegie Mellon brought me in to speak. And I love Carnegie Mellon, one of the top MBA business schools in the country. And what do I love about them? Carnegie Mellon, named after Andrew Carnegie. As soon as you walk into that business school, and that business school is palatial, glass, aluminum, stainless steel, state-of-the-art. Soon as you walk into that business school, endowment off the chain, what is the first picture you see? You see a picture of Andrew Carnegie and Booker T. Washington standing together. And Andrew Carnegie giving Booker T. Washington in 1906 a check for more than $300,000. What do you think $300,000 would be worth today, my brother?
Right.
That's powerful, man. And he gave it all away. My pension as a college professor is based on what Andrew Carnegie, TIA craft. So, I mean, do what you've been sent here to do. I could go on and on and on and on and on, my brother. Fire away. Let's go.
No, you know, all the questions I had, you just basically answered, because again, there are so many people out there who will sit there and make it, and I don't want to call them excuses because they're legitimate, the things that they have to go through, and especially black people with the systemic racism that they have to deal with on a daily basis. And yeah, this is the thing I get upset with some white people because all white people aren't like this. In fact, I would say the majority aren't. There's a number of white people out there who don't think that there's such thing as white privilege, and I even hear black guys saying there's no such thing as white privilege, and I go, how how can you even say that? I know for a fact as a white man that just the simple fact that I don't have to worry about getting pulled over by police officers or getting shot because I know I'm white. I also don't have to worry about if I go for a job interview that I'm going to be not considered because somebody else stepped in a different color that they would prefer over mine, because I know that that happens. I've seen it happen. I know how you know I've seen racism firsthand in many, many cases. I had one of my friends who I used to go over his house. We were teenagers, and we used to play Nintendo. That'll tell you how old I am. So we were playing Nintendo. We were playing Tecmo Bowl, and we were like 17, 18 years of age, somewhere around there. And because he was black, and because I was white, and he was driving, we got pulled over three separate occasions for no reason other than the fact that there was a white guy and a black guy in the same car. So we had to be up to something. And I go, when you see this kind of thing firsthand, and again, I've only seen the mild part of it. I know what goes on beyond that. I used to be a police officer many years ago, and I saw the racism in the department, and I saw the mentality of that racism, and that whole them against us type mentality. It's cultivated into that, into every department across this country. And even if you have good uh, department heads, captains, or sheriffs who want to get rid of that, then you have these strong police unions that allow these bad cops to continue to be police officers, whether it's in that same department or going to a different department. And so I see these issues that these people have to deal with. So they're not just excuses when they say, well, it's great to to say all those things. How does a person get to that point, like Booker T. Washington, where they say, I'm not going to allow a person to bring me down to that level ever again?
Well, number one, like I said, you got to be willing to grow. Your education never ends. Um, I grew up in the same neighborhood. I was born in Jersey City, New Jersey, and I grew up in my childhood and left high school, go to college in three small towns in Jersey: Kearney, Newark, New Jersey, and East Orange. And I remember on the block that I lived, we had all different races, all different cultures, and whatever. And if you didn't have a father in the home, it was because of one reason and one reason only. He was killed in World War II. And I've had friends on that block whose father certainly gave of his life in World War II. But the fact of the matter, Kirk, and in terms of how do we get to that position, we got to be willing to trust each other. We got to be willing to grow and develop as individuals. And we've got to know if this country is going to be the country that we want it to be, we got to come to the mindset, then we got to make it that way. Then we have got to make it that way. I don't know if you heard, but I tell my students all the time that Martin Luther King and Steve Jobs, both in two different industries, whatever, used the same marketing campaign to reach their goals and objectives. Number one, tell me where we are. Dr. King, tell me where we are. Well, this country wrote a black man a check that came back marked insufficient funds. Okay. Steve Jobs, tell me where we are. Well, if you're like me, I know that you got 50 million different electronic accessories in your pocket. You got a cell phone, you got an MP3 player, you got a beeper, you got a pager, whatever. Great. Number two, tell me where we can be. Okay, Dr. King, tell me where we can be. Well, like I said, this country wrote a black man a check that came back marked insufficient funds, but I had a dream that my 4 children one day will be measured by, the character rather than the color of the skin. Thank you very much. Steve Jobs, tell me where we can be. Well, if you're like me, you got 50 million different electronic gadgets, but I called my system engineers, my product designers into my office, and I said, wouldn't it be great if you could take all these accessories and put them on one item? Thank you very much. Now, this is critical, Kurt. Number 3, make it that way. Dr. King, make it that way. Well, this country wrote a black man a check that came back marked insufficient funds, but I had a dream that my 3 children would be judged on their character rather than the color of the skin. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. Steve Jobs, make it that way. April 2007, ladies and gentlemen, introducing the iPhone. Now, why would I share that with you, and why is that the track that we have to run? Because on April 28, 1963, Martin Luther King got more than 250,000 people to come to Washington, D.C. on a sweltering August summer day. Kurt, more than 1/4 were white. And they didn't come to Washington, D.C. because King wanted them to. They came because they wanted to. What John Maxwell calls level 5 leadership. Steve Jobs got individuals to wait in line in the middle of the winter, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning in freezing rain outside an AT&T store so they could be the first one to walk into the office and say, look what I have. That's level 5 leadership. Malcolm Gladwell became a multimillionaire because he wrote a book called Tipping Point based off of level 5 leadership. People don't care about you until they realize how much you care about them. And any problem, I don't care if the problem is homelessness, I don't care if the problem is drug addiction, I don't care if the problem is you can't find your father with a roadmap, I don't care if the problem is equal opportunity, I don't even care if the problem is shaving bumps, bloodshot eyes, or cancer. Any problem, according to Malcolm Gladwell, level 5 leadership can be solved if only enough people care. We've got to get enough people who care. This isn't about, when we say Black Lives Matter, this isn't about down with the police. This is about police brutality. When we say Black Lives Matter, this isn't zero sum, that white America, all the other colors, you lose. No. This whole issue about reparations, and like I said, Kurt, people don't understand. The first reparations ever given in this country occurred in 1862. Abraham Lincoln gave more than what? 700 former slave owners $300 apiece because they had to give up, what, 2,700 slaves. That was the first reparations, were to white slave owners. Why? Because he was trying to keep the Union together. You look at the internment camps during World War II, Japanese Americans were finally given $20,000 apiece, which was nothing. These folks gave up their businesses, and now you're going to give them $20,000 apiece? You look at the Tuskegee experiment. When the Tuskegee experiment, your federal government, listen, every burden heaped on the back of Black America came from the federal government. Well, the Tuskegee experiment wasn't any different. You know, they got more than 600 Black men, and they said, no, we'll cap it off at 408. But more than 600 Black men said, sign me up. Why? Because they were going through the Black community saying, if you volunteer for this test, we'll give you free health care. And we'll even give you a stipend, blah, blah, blah. And syphilis ravaged their bodies, and Kurt, all they had to do in 99% of those cases is give them 1 dose of penicillin. And now, by the time Obama got to office, look, that Tuskegee experiment was started in 1932. It didn't end until the year I graduated from college undergrad in 1972. They knew what was wrong. What the hell were people doing for 40 years? Well, those same things those other police officers were doing. Going back to Booker T. Washington, do what you have to do when you know that you have to do it, whether you want to or not. That's discipline. You don't compromise your two values. And the two types of discipline that we have got to wrestle with every day. Number one, it's called the pain of discipline. There's two types of pain. The pain of discipline. And what is the pain of discipline? No, I'm not going to run today. I'm going to take off, man. I don't feel like it. No, I'm going to start my diet Monday. No, I'm not going to study for that exam. There's a party going on. It's a Friday, Saturday night. Let's go. That's the pain of discipline. Well, if you can't harness that pain of discipline, there's another type of pain that you're going to have to factor in. What? It's called the pain of regret. Okay? So now you were supposed to graduate in 4 years because you didn't discipline yourself in studying. Now you got to study an extra 2 years, and what is that going to cost you? Because you wouldn't watch your weight, you ate that cake and you didn't exercise. Now you got diabetes. You got a pain of regret. And I hope this country, it's a great opportunity, we don't fall into the pain of regret. Do what you have to do when you know that you have to do, whether you want to or not.
You know, it's funny you say that because I feel like this country, you know, we're at where we're at because of our past actions. We made choices and we made some very bad choices. And now we're paying for it. And I hear everyone complaining about it. It's like, well, what did you think was going to happen? You know, all these years we've been making bad choices and we keep pushing it off and pushing it off. It's going to catch up with us sooner or later. And I think that's what's happened is that it's finally caught up with us and we're paying for all the bad choices that we've been making over the decades. And it's kind of culminated to this point that we're at right now. And I think we have a great opportunity here to move in the right direction for a change.
Yeah.
We're going to go one of two directions, and I'm hoping for the fact that we make the right
Well,
choice.
I know we're going the right direction because I'm an optimist, but you got to understand, Kurt, and I had to cut in to say that it begins with each of us. It begins with me. It begins with you. I tell my students all the time, great social movements they don't start with the chorus. They start with the soloist. They don't begin with the choir. They begin with the soloist. That one individual. One is the most powerful number on the face of the earth. I mean, it wasn't the choir, it wasn't the chorus that said, it'd be a good idea if we gave women the right to vote. No, it began with Susan B. Anthony. It began with, Ida B. Wells. It began with those individuals. Do you think the choir, do you think the masses of people said, it'd be a good idea if we freed the slaves? No, it began with Harriet Tubman. It began with Nat Turner. It began with John Brown. It begins with one individual. Until we recognize we have that power. Again, going back to Dr. King, you got a power that's more powerful than bullets. You got a power that's more powerful than anything that you can use in your fist in your hand. The greatest power that you've ever been given by your creator is the ability to change your mind. And some people, unfortunately, would rather die than change your mind.
That's what I find.
My students say to me all the time, Dr. Kimbro, it seems like there's more people that hate than more people that love. Bad, wrong. There's more people who love than hate. The only problem is those who hate, they hate with conviction. And Kurt, what in God's name is conviction? Conviction is a force multiplier. That's all that Lincoln had, man. When Lincoln got his cabinet together, and they were together, and he said, I don't care what you do in terms of an amendment, we got an Emancipation Proclamation. He held a cabinet meeting, and I love that scene in the movie from Lincoln where he slams his hand down. What was that whole scene? Lincoln finally realized that he was an abolitionist, but the cabinet that he hired, they were anti-slavery. And that was there's a huge difference between somebody being anti-slavery and somebody being an abolitionist. What do you mean, Dr. Kimbro? All right. I said, I go down, here I am, I live in the North, and I'm driving down to Atlanta, and I'm with a group of people, folks who were anti-slavery, and I would say, man, what's this talk I hear that you guys own slaves and blah, blah, blah. And the folks who were anti-slavery said, man, that is dumb. Man, they should get over that, man. No one does that anymore. But if I ask somebody who's anti-slavery, slams the hand down, says, not now, not tomorrow, not ever, not on my watch. In other words, this far, no further. Big difference. That's conviction. And that is a force multiplier.
Oh, got to bring a little. That was definitely conviction.
Yep.
It shook your camera.
Yeah, one more.
Now it's too low.
There we are.
No, almost.
Getting close, Kurt.
And just a little bit higher. We got to. We can see your eyes now.
There we are.
There we go. We're back to normal. All right.
So that's what you got to do.
So
you got to use your conviction. You got to use your power. Make a difference. 4 things in life you want to do. Number 1, you want to make a difference. Number 2, you want to make a difference with somebody else who makes a difference. Number 3, you want to make a difference with somebody else, make a difference doing something that makes a difference. But number 4, you want to make a difference with somebody else who wants to make a difference doing something that makes a difference at a time when it makes all the difference in the world. And this is the time. This is the time. And going back to what you started it off when you asked me about love. This is all your fault. Let's wrap a bow around this. Let's wrap a bow. I don't care whether you go to King. I don't care whether you go to Gandhi. I don't care whether you go to Nelson Mandela. What do they all have in common? All of their social movements were based on love. And that's the one thing I would tell anybody. There has never been a social movement that endured that wasn't based on love. That wasn't based on love. You go to Nelson Mandela, King, Gandhi, they had prayer. What did Gandhi say? Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jew, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that God is being praised. Don't you know that Martin Luther King had a dress code? If you marched with him, he had a dress code. He wanted you in your Sunday best because that's the image he wants shown on TV. Look at those poor Negroes. They look like they just came back from church. And they got the fire hoses on them. They got the German Shepherd dogs. That's powerful. And then here you have Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, he's about to be inaugurated as the first president of the newly democratic South African government. And he still had members of the ANC, the African National Congress. And they said, Nelson, now that you are going to be president, what do you want with Pick Botha and F.W. de Klerk? 2 individuals who wanted you hung for treason. What are we going to do with them? And what did Mandela say, Kurt Powers? He said, I know exactly what we're going to do with them. We're going to give them front row seats at my inauguration. And they said, Nelson, you got to be kidding me. Our men were on, we're ready. Give us the announcement. We got to put an end to them. He says, no, we're going to give them front row seats at my inauguration because if I don't learn to forgive them, I will still be back on that island in Robben Island. That's where we need to be. So this is the greatest time in history. Why? Because you got your best thinkers. You got your best educators. You got your best leaders. You got your best advisors. You got some of the best influencers, some of the best thought leaders on the planet. And all of that is focused on only 1 or 2 problems. Wow, can you imagine what's going to come out of this, Kurt? And what are the 1 or 2 problems? It might be the pandemic. It might be Black Lives Matter. It might be rectifying all the wrongs of the past. It might be that, you only got a couple of issues of the day and you got all that thinking power. This is what Einstein said in his theory of relativity. Man, he said you can't solve today's problems yesterday. It's about growth. It's about development. It's all relative. Okay, so you say, where Black folks are poor and this and that. Well, compared to the rest of the world, our definition of poverty is affluence. You got 50% of the world, Kurt, 50% of the world living on $5 a day. And here we pronounce poverty as a family of four, less than $27,000. Well, relatively speaking, you're affluent. What are you going to do with all the advantage that you have? I always ask my students, if I gave you $1 million, what problem would you solve? If I gave you $1 billion, what problem would you solve? That's what entrepreneurs do. Entrepreneurs solve problems. You got entrepreneurs right now who are working in corporate America. You got entrepreneurs right now who are working for social service agencies. You solve a small problem, you get a little bit of money. You solve a big problem, and you get bank-like king. So what we gotta do, we gotta start solving these problems. And that's where we are now. And this is the best time in the world to be alive. If you are reading, you are growing, you are studying, you are developing. Just like the sign I have in my classroom. If you don't read, if you don't study, if you don't grow, if you don't develop, if you don't go to the seminars, if you don't go to the conferences, if you don't go to the workshops, if you don't sit in the front row in the first seat and take good notes, another student will. And the day you meet that other student, you lose. So America right now, because the world has been moving, we've been losing. We've been losing. I mean, over the weekend, I saw the soccer match, and this is what the soccer match, this European soccer match or whatever, female soccer match, it was Europe or whatever, I just caught a glimpse of it. And all of them, different cultures, different races on the soccer team, they took a knee. And they weren't playing the national anthem of this country. They were playing different national, but they took a knee. I've been blessed in my classroom. Every now and then, I've had so many actors, entertainers, celebrities come into one of my classes at Clark, Atlanta. And last year, gotta share this with you, Kurt. Last year, a gentleman comes in my class completely, totally unannounced. And when he walked into class, I knew exactly who he is. My students didn't know. I mean, a 50-year difference, they didn't know. And who was it? It was John Carlos, 1968 Summer Olympic Games. John Carlos came into my class completely, and I could tell with John, he had a little pot belly, gray beard, blah, blah, blah. And when I saw him come in, I rolled my sleeves down, put my cufflinks back on. I said, this class is over with. I'm not teaching more. To our guests, come on down. Tell my students, what's on your mind. And I said to my students, who is this individual? And they were just looking around. I said, come on, you know who he is. You've probably seen this poster 50 million. No, Dr. Kimbro, we don't know. And I pointed to John Carlos and I said, give the stance. Yep. And he gave the black arm. And they went, oh, Dr. Kimbro. I said, John, would you entertain some questions for my students? So one of my students asked, do you mentor? And he says, yeah, I mentor all the time. He says, as a matter of fact, one of my mentees right now is Colin Kaepernick. John Carlos is Colin Kaepernick's mentor. He says, me and Colin, we speak, 2-3 times a day. And when you connect the dots, you could see why he would be his mentor and blah, blah, blah. And then the follow-up question, well, who mentors you? And he told my students, Harry Belafonte. And he says, why Harry Belafonte? Because he said Harry Belafonte told him, he lives out in Beverly Hills, he said, the average actor and entertainer out here in Beverly Hills, as soon as they wake up in the morning, they call their accountant to see how much money they have in the bank. Harry Belafonte says, as soon as I wake up in the morning, I would either call Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela. He said, now, who do you think is going to live a more fulfilled life?
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. And it's funny because Colin Kaepernick is also on my top 10 list of guests.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, man. Yeah. Everybody, just like Muhammad Ali, when he wouldn't go to the Vietnam War, now he's carrying the Olympic fame. But the fact of the matter that we were able to grow and we were able to look the prodigal son. Hey, mea culpa. Just like I got 3 daughters, and whenever they get together over the holidays, they start catching up and everything. So one day eating breakfast and they're talking and they just start gossiping. And she said this and she said that. And don't you know such and such told me this and blah, blah, blah. And I said, time out. I said, time out. Who y'all talking about? And I said, well, they're talking about such. I said, well, let me take the side of this individual. Let me speak on this individual's behalf. What are the three toughest things in the world to do, Kurt? Number one, three toughest thing is to assume the stance of somebody else. It's called empathy. Okay. Number two is, hey man, say I'm sorry. Say I'm sorry. It was my fault. And number three is, besides apologizing, thanks for bringing that to my attention. And you'd be shocked how few people can do that. Can we wrap this bad boy up, my man?
Yes, we can. I wanted to say this real quick, though, because I think this is important. You said one is the most powerful number, but as Three Dog Night pointed out, it's also the loneliest number. And I think that's why we don't have as many people who stand up and do the right thing. And so,
Yep.
what would one last piece of advice? What would you say to the masses out there? Because I know that your words are going to reach people, individuals out there. How do these individuals, how do we gather together to become more than just one? How do we make that movement so that we can get the people who are part of that herd mentality, to get them to come on board and to see, the light in your words, and get them to be part of that?
Well, yeah, again, I'm glad you brought that to my attention in terms of, one being the loneliest number. Years ago, I had an interview with Secretary of Commerce, Ron Brown. He was Secretary of Commerce under the Clinton administration. And I'm interviewing him. And I said, Mr. Secretary, can we talk about success? Can we talk about achievement? Can we talk about leadership? And when I said leadership, he lit up like a Christmas tree. And he said, there's only two requirements of leadership. And I said, what are they? He said, number one, you can never be concerned what other people think, say, or do. That's one of the requirements of leadership. You can never be concerned what others think, say, or do. And number two, the price of leadership is always loneliness.
Yes.
The price of leadership is always loneliness. So where must we be? Again, let's go back to the beginning with Napoleon Hill. Mindset, heart set, health set, soul set. And I like to focus in on soul set and heart set. What is heart set? Releasing the ego. We need less ego, more humanity. We need less me, more we. And what is soul set? Soul set is living life in the moment. And what is living life in the moment? I always go back to Dr. King. And Martin Luther King got up at the same time of day, every day, 6:15 in the morning. And the first hour of the day, just like Nelson Mandela too, the first hour of the day was for prayer and devotion. He would go to his book line study. There were less than 300 books, had the same breakfast every morning, coffee and orange juice. And for the first hour, prayer and devotion. Well, before Martin Luther King would go to bed each night, the last thing he did before that 39-year-old head hit that pillow was prayer and devotion. So when I tell my students, live in the moment, what moment are we talking about? The life between two prayers. Now, this has nothing to do with religion. It's got nothing to do with spirituality. You follow whoever you want to follow. But the fact of the matter is, Kurt, we speak to God through prayer, and God speaks to us through intuition. Speaks to us through intuition. Where do ideas come from? An idea comes from your creator knocking on your subconscious, asking you, do you want more out of life? Man shall not live by bread alone. What does that mean? Simon Sinek, you better have a why. You better have a why. And it can't be money. Going to Steve Jobs. Steve, you're the youngest billionaire out there, man. What does that mean to you? Will you quit focusing on the money? I didn't do this for the money. I did this to produce insanely productive products for people who enjoyed them. What is your why? Never love anything that can't love you back. Kurt, my brother.
Those are amazing words, Dr. Kimbro. Thank you. I cannot thank you enough. It's been a pleasure I'm telling you, the best thing I could have done was just shut up and let you talk. I look like a genius by doing that. So, um, again, thank you. I wish you all. Oh, I just one last thing. Your foundation. Talk about your foundation real quick. And your website and stuff
Yep.
where people can reach you.
Yep, you can reach me info@denniskimbro.com. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm the like, but the Kimbro Success Academy will be released probably late summer, early fall. And the reason why we're doing this, because again, you started it off 1991 with Think and Grow Rich. Next year will be the 30th anniversary of Think and Grow Rich, a Black Choice. It will be released in a new format, a lot of bells and whistles, this, that, and everything. And I got some exciting things because 30 years, it's been one of the top 100, Amazon tracks 6 million to 8 million books every day. And they have a number of categories. And when you look at Black African studies, whatever, for 30 years, it's been on the top 100. So I've been blessed. I am extremely grateful. Every author wants an audience for his or her voice, and I've been given one, but it doesn't make a difference if it doesn't improve the life of others. We are all one. I could care less about your race. I could care less about your culture and ethnicity. Dr. Kimbro, does that mean I'm your brother's keeper? No, it means I'm your brother's brother. And again, Kirk, going back to King says the highest form of love is not between a parent and child. It's not between the parent and the child on the other side of town. It's between the parent and the child on the other side of the world. That is the highest form of love. I love you, my brother. You hang in there, and I got a funny feeling we got a lot more to talk about.
I was going to say, I thoroughly enjoyed this. I would love to have you back on the show anytime, especially when you hit the 30th anniversary. I'd love to have you back on and talk about everything that you did with.
Yeah, and when I come back on, let's talk about book number 5, The Wealth Choice, what I found out, because I didn't talk about that at all. I didn't talk about that at all, man. What are you doing, Kurt? No, but I didn't even talk about that.
You hit on
all your fault.
So many major points, and you made such powerful words that I couldn't have asked for a better interview. So and like I said, it wasn't even like an interview. It's like you and I were at lunch, and I sat back and just soaked into wisdom. So
wow. And one of the first interviews I had when I when I was given the task of writing Think and Grow Rich, a Black Choice, I flew out to California and spent a part of the day with Tom Sowell, the Hoover Institution.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow.
Powerful. Yeah. And I hate to see him and Walter Williams dragged into this neoconservative nonsense with all these other clowns out. That's not Sowell and Walter Williams.
Right.
You see, Tom Sowell and Walter Williams, they would never denigrate African Americans. They would only point out to social policies that were used in Europe and other part of the countries and what it's doing to this constituency here. But you got a bunch of these nonsense clowns out there who just giving a tiny bit of information, man.
Right.
And everybody's an expert. Everybody's an expert. Everybody's a pundit. Read the book, brother. Read the book. Close your mouth. The best prayer is finger on pursed lips and think. I love you, man. I'm out of here.
All right. I love you too. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you for the listeners and people viewing this. And until next time, stay healthy and take care.